Lawyers of Reddit, what is the most badass I rest my case moment you ever witnessed? My mum was a personal injury solicitor, and she was basically trying to prove that the car that hit her client and caused life-changing injuries, brain damage, belonged to X. X at first pretends not to live where he does. Then the car is found abandoned or wiped down. The trail seems to end. Then, my mum has a hunch and checks X's Facebook. He had a public profile, and his profile picture was his standing next to the car in question. She screenshots them and sends them to the opposing counsel with a slightly more politely worded backquote, "Your client's a dumb duck." She's retired now, but she considers it to be one of the most satisfying moments of her career. Needless to say, she won the case and her client got a £1 million settlement and is now living in Spain. All for the want of a simple privacy setting and a touch of common sense. Not a lawyer, but just had a case where a guy embezzled and sued us. He had done it by moving money to his company and calling it into company loans. His expert witness, who was a CPA, was asked about their one document they had produced, and she said, "As you can see, this document shows that embezzling plaintiff owes your company $650K. We had no questions and rested right there. He should probably have gotten a CPA on the same page with him." Not a lawyer, but I read about this. Two guys were being tried for robbing a gas station. A customer who saw the robbery was now on the witness stand. The prosecutor asked him to describe what he saw. He said that he saw two guys robbing the store and then running out, and one of them bumped into him. Then the prosecutor looked at the two perps and said, "Are those two men in the courtroom today?" At which point, the two idiots raised their hands. Case closed. Edit. Grammar. I practice immigration law. Had a woman come in and explain that she was from Canada, had been living and working in the US without permission for decades. Boyfriend beat her up to the point where she was hospitalized. She pressed charges and the boyfriends basically let her know via friends that his lawyer was going to call her credibility into question since she was an illegal immigrant. Turns out her mom was born in the US and met the dad in college, which meant that she could gain dual citizenship via mom. We got her citizenship certificate expedited, and I made her promise not to tell anyone. Sure enough, at trial, defense attorney asks, "Isn't it true that you are a Canadian citizen who has been working illegally in the US for decades?" To which she replies, "No. In fact, here's my certificate of citizenship. I'm a dual Canadian and US citizen." She said the lawyer looked like a puppet when someone cut the strings. Boyfriend became a guest of the state for a long time. One of my top posts ever is relevant here. For a while my mother dated a man who really liked to act like a big shot. He was a guy that claimed to know a guy wherever you went. Anytime you wanted something he would say, "Oh wait, let's go to $store name, I'll talk to $OWNER and get you a deal." Nearly every time he did, the owner seemed like he wasn't entirely sure who this guy was. He would do shit like insist on taking the whole family on a vacation, or take everyone to a fancy restaurant, or he would show up with expensive gifts out of the blue, shit like new electronics or guitars. Eventually the relationship ends, but not long after we find out he's taking us to court because we owe him money. Court date comes, he presents his case first. He goes through a huge itemized list of every item he ever bought us. Every single item, from a vending machine Coke to a new sink because he broke the old one. Even a birthday cake bought for the youngest child. Once he's done, the judge asks if there was an agreement to be paid back for any of that. He says it was just an understanding. The judge asks specifically if he ever said he wanted to be paid back. He says no, that usually when someone buys you something you pay them back. The judge then explained that no, in fact that's not usually how gifts work, and that by his own admission there was never an expectation to pay for anything. So after his own testimony, the case was closed. He then appealed. Again he presented his testimony first. Again, closed by his own words. A little late, but this is one of my dad's favorite stories. So he is out of state on business driving through some no-name town when he goes through an intersection. Suddenly a cop pulls him over stating that he ran a stop sign and ticketed him. My dad insisted there was not any stop sign, but the cop did not list pissed. He went back to the intersection and saw that there was a stop sign hidden behind a tree and twisted in the wrong direction. Even more pissed, he went to a convenience store that was in sight of the intersection and bought a disposable camera while the clerk laughed because he saw what happened and knew what's up. Luckily, my dad had to be back there in a few weeks for work. The cop assumed that someone with out-of-state plates would just pay the ticket, and they were shocked when my dad turned up in court, calmly presented his evidence to the judge, and strolled out in 5 minutes scot-free. Working as a paralegal. Divorce case. Hired by wife. Husband insists he never had an affair with their female friend. Days later, paralegal in charge asks me to show paralegal intern how to do property search. Last address in mind is the possible mistress. Type an address, look at deed, get parcel, even get a satellite photo. This is important. I print up satellite photo. Attorneys meet. Our boss L asks, Mr. Husband, you insist you never had an affair with Ms. Woman, correct? H, that's correct. L, did you ever go to her house for anything? H, no. I can't remember where she lives. L, millimeter HMM. So between the dates of blah and blah you never visited her residence? H, annoyed, no, never. L, what vehicle do you drive? H, Ford something big like F350. L, what color? H, white. L, anything in that truck bed? H, toolbox. L, silver, the kind that's bolted in place. H, yeah. L, do your truck and toolbox look anything like the ones at Ms. Woman's house in this satellite photo, taken on such and such date? H, sheet. Summary. Husband swears he never visited the house of his alleged mistress, only to be caught by a satellite photo. Wasn't my case, but in criminal docket court one morning the accused wore a pair of very unique custom-made red cowboy boots. Stolen from the house he was accused of robbing. Wore them to court to plead not guilty. The prosecutor was laughing. I used to work in baby daddy court as a case worker. This guy kept telling me, the mother of the child, anyone who would listen that the baby wasn't his. When they went before the judge confirmed through DNA testing that he wasn't the dad. Dude turned around and took off his jacket. His shirt said not the father. Edit, the guy kept telling me, the mother of the child, and anyone who would list my bad. I got a violation put against my name for land I didn't own. It was the land next to mine owned by the city. I took pictures of how the violation was posted on the city's land, how the city's land was in violation of grass height laws, its orientation to my land, how the violation did not have my lot's number, but the city lot's number, and brought the posted violation to court with me. Got up to the stand, explained myself and presented my pictures. The inspector who wrote the violation stood and called me by name that wasn't mine, then showed pictures of a busted up car with a bunch of weeds on it I had never seen before. The judge raised her eyebrow and asked what address this was. He said an address that was across town from mine. I say that I also do not own that land. She removes the fines. Case dismissed. Not so much a rest my case moment, but a memorable one. There was a deposition of a witness and a room full of attorneys. Witness is asked if he knows or has spoken with any of the atties in the room before the deposition. Witness responds he knows ATX because sometimes they go to the same parties and snort coke together. Needless to say, ATX had an immediate meltdown. A good transcript to keep. Fraud trial. Prosecution QC gets right to the point pretty much. Third question into defendant. So you earn £45,000 a year, have no properties, no other source of income, no inheritance, and as far as I'm aware have not won the lottery, yet you have foreign bank accounts with £X million and a Ferrari. It must simply be a coincidence that defrauded entity has an accounting black hole pretty much equal to those riches the defendant pretty much gave up at that point. Was on a jury. Defendant attempted to rob a tip jar from a barista, and the barista fought back. He ran, and she tossed the empty jar towards him. Defendant claims that he was hit on the head and injured by the metal tip jar. Even though we'd already watched the video, and I already caught this detail, the prosecutor asked to play the video of the robbery again. And then she says how could the barista had hit him in the front of the head when she was throwing it from behind. And he's wearing a hat. She was so annoyed she had to point that out. I almost laughed. Not a lawyer, but I once got stopped by a cop for a fix-it ticket. Basically, you have to fix a broken tail light and get a cop to sign the ticket or pay the fine. That night, my car was totaled by a drunk driver who ran off the road and hit it at high speed. Can't fix a tail light if you don't have the car anymore. So I wound up going in on my court date to contest the ticket. Say sorry, I couldn't get the light fixed and don't think I should have to pay. The judge gives me this look like, what's your excuse? Then I hand over the police report papers and briefly explain about the wreck. I didn't have to pay. When I was in law school, I clerked for a criminal defense legal clinic. We had an assault and battery case where there was only one witness to the crime, which was the victim. I was sitting at the defense table with the actual attorney, another law student that worked on the case with me, and the defendant. We were all in similar looking suits as a matter of unplanned coincidence. The victim was asked to identify the person who committed the assault in court and she pointed to me and not the defendant. Our attorney asked several times if she was really pointing to me and if she was sure, and she said yes. The prosecutor was visibly upset and the trial pretty much ended there, as this was a bench trial and not with a jury. It was never discussed or admitted to, but I suspect our attorney purposefully had me there at the trial because I did have a passing resemblance of the defendant. I was in an accident a few years ago, other guy's fault. He got a ticket for unsafe left turn, and I got a ticket because I wasn't wearing my seatbelt. In the section on the ticket, the cop inadvertently wrote, "Did wear seatbelt while operating motor vehicle." When I got to court, the judge asked how I wanted to plead. I asked the judge if I could ask a question first, and he said sure. I stated the ticket says I did wear my seatbelt while operating motor vehicle, and if that's the case, I want to plead guilty. Judge looks down at the ticket and looks back at me and says, "Case dismissed. Have a good day." I did. A friend told me this story. He's not a lawyer, but was job shadowing or something, and was in court for the day. Anyway, one of the cases was a girl contesting a stop sign violation. The prosecutor asked how long she was stopped at the stop sign and the girl responds 40 to 50 seconds. The prosecutor asks her to look at the clock in the courtroom and proceeds to stay silent for the next 30 seconds, which is a really long time. Once the 30 seconds is up, the prosecutor looks back at her and says, "Were you really stopped 40 to 50 seconds?" And the girl was basically silent. I'm pretty sure she was found guilty. Late to the show, but I used to be a domestic violence advocate and helped victims get protective orders against their abusers. At one hearing, my client told her story of abuse, him hitting her after an argument. The judge asked him, "So did you hit her? Is her story true?" He says, and I quote, "Now judge, it was just a little love tap, you know how it is." The judge blinked twice, stunned, slammed his gavel, and granted her petition. Not me, but a buddy who is a DUI attorney. In the state he practiced, in being in the car with the keys in the ignition, even if the engine isn't running, is considered a DUI if you're intoxicated. Had a client come in, told his story to my buddy. The buddy goes to the DA after discovery and says, "Don't take this to trial." DA says, "Yeah, right." In court, he gets the state trooper who made the arrest up on the stand and the trooper says under oath, "I saw with my own two eyes that the keys were in the ignition." Buddy gives the cop several tries to walk it back, then has it read into the record that the car was a Prius. Boom. Instant dismissal and the state he got into some trouble. I was in court on a speeding ticket and the case before mine was Fred the town drunk. It went like this. Judge, Fred, the charges here say you were arrested Saturday night in town drunk. How do you plead? Fred, I don't know. Judge, what do you mean, Fred? Were you in town Saturday night or not? Fred, well, that's what I don't know. I have no idea where I was Saturday night, but if I was in town, then I damn sure was drunk. Judge, chuckling. Okay Fred, how's $25 sound? As a clerk in the district attorney's office a few years ago, there was a battery case where the victim, addict wandering the streets likely picking fights, got into an altercation and had his hand chopped off by the defendant's machete. The day the victim came in to testify, the clerk asked him to raise his hand and swear. to tell the whole truth, etc. And when he raised the handless nub, every single juror gasped for air and we knew a conviction was on the way. This may not apply, but there is a Judge Judy episode where a high school girl is suing 2 boys from her school for taking her backpack and stealing various valuables out of it, and something like the following conversation happened. Judge Judy: and what was taken from your backpack? Girl: my phone, my money, my headphones. Boy 1: no, they weren't. Judge Judy: excuse me. Boy 1: there weren't any headphones in the backpack. Obligatory: I'm not a lawyer, but this happened to my wife in small claims court. Background: we lived in a small coastal town in the mid 1990s. She was attending the local community college, which was located on a steep hill. The main road ascending the hill had most of the side streets barricaded for some reason. One day as she was driving up the hill to classes, she happened to be behind an older man in a small truck. The man attempted to turn onto a side street, but found it barricaded, so he put the truck in reverse and backed into my wife. My wife said the man was apologetic as they exchanged information and gave her his phone number so they could work out how he would pay for the damage. When we called the number he gave, his wife answered and began to berate my wife, telling her that it was her fault and that we were going to have to pay. No way. Small claims court is the answer. Our day in court arrived, and things looked pretty bad for us, since it was our word against his, and rear-end accidents are usually considered to be the trailing driver's fault. Before making his ruling, however, the judge decided to skim the paperwork one last time. A slight chuckle emitted from the judge and he asked the man if he remembered filling out the accident report. Yes, Your Honor. Then you probably remember stating on the accident form that you put your truck into reverse, backing into the car behind you. You've incriminated yourself and lied to the court. I'm awarding the full amount. Case closed. Consider yourself lucky I'm not charging you with contempt. The wife and I high-fived in the hall outside the courtroom. Late to the game, but it's a good one. I'm not a lawyer, attorney, etc., but for this trial I was in the jury. The case was about a mother who had raised her son into a sex toy. It was awful. She got him hooked on drugs, twisted his mind with shame, and because he was an up-and-coming model she was hiding her abuse by claiming she wasn't doing anything but trying to break him free of his dangerous lifestyle. It was absurd and disgusting, and it was working, because the better lawyer played with his head the worse he reacted. Shaking, sudden tone changes, the poor kid was losing it in the face of his bravest/scariest moment. Then his brother turned everything on its side by speaking well out of turn. He went way off rails on an answer, turned directly to us, and starts calling out behavior of hers that neither side had presented, including how she went after him and has now started in on the youngest sibling. The judge instructed him to stop, but with no effort, volume, or authority. It's like he wanted it to happen. We were instructed to erase that from put minds. Here is the IRS my case moment. The defense attorney was clearly upset at the turn of events and goes extra hard at the primary victim, the eldest, model boy on drugs. It's getting way heated, shouting, rough language, all being allowed by the judge. Somewhere in this verbal beaches of Normandy the defense attorney screams, admit it. You went there, his mother's house, his own home, until he ran away looking for sex. We the jury just looked at each other, as if Rush Limbaugh was the new star of Hamilton. Why the hell would he go there for sex, if she never had sex with him? I'll never forget the look on the prosecutor's face. It was like a coach after a game-winning play. That the other team ran for him. Worth noting that after the trial guilty BTW the judge had a Q&A with us jurors. Because of how crazy things had been, he said he was certain she was guilty after he reviewed the notes pre-trial, but was getting concerned that it wouldn't be proof. He never said it, but he totally let things slide so the truth would get out. Very interesting couple of days.
N.